Anything else? So I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Do I have a
I second.
motion? Any second? Any further discussion on the matter? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. The next item on the agenda is to approve the April 2018 minutes. Please look through, and if there's anything that needs to be changed or clarified or edited, please bring forth.
Got a point of clarification under approval of collection policy. I believe that it was, in the second sentence, negotiate terms of payment up to 12 months instead of 6 months. Yes. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve it as amended.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next item, the management report, which can be found starting on page 16.
Do you want treasurers or just,
Oh, excuse me.
Steve's not here, but-
Excuse me, I missed that.
Okay.
Going back, the item on the agenda is to approve the 2018 April financials, page 4 through 15.
I had one question under other assets. It lists under 1601, it lists the Bobcat as $31,000. I don't expect an answer tonight, but perhaps for the next meeting, since it's on the balance sheet. Since this was traded in last year, would it still remain on there, or is it offset somewhere else? Would be my question. So on page 4,
I was just gonna say.
line 1601.
Is that just is it mislabeled at all? Is that supposed to be just tractor?
What number, what was the code? 16?
1601.
Other asset.
Yep, I see it.
And if the case is mislabeled, I mean, wasn't our purchase price like 25 minus trade-in?
Yep.
So that appreciated in value since we purchased it?
Okay.
Would be a follow-up question.
Okay. I will look into that.
I remember something like this came up in our audit. I want to say something regarding the trade-in value of the Bobcat and how it was still on our books. Is that ringing a bell?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I don't, like I said, I don't expect an answer, but just so it's on the radar.
Okay.
It's not imperative. It would be a side
Sure,
night, but it
sure.
should be cleaned up as we move forward.
Yeah. Let's get that cleaned up, Carrie.
Yep.
And then the next board directive at the next meeting, just check in on that.
Okay. No problem.
I had one thing too, I was wondering, we're still seeing, if you go to page 10,
Mm-hmm.
this is just a question too, there's not gonna be an answer, but it looks like, again, this year, we're still seeing a fairly large start to the year in terms of our water and sewer bill
Okay.
compared to what we had budgeted or what we expected to see.
All
Now, I
right.
don't know if that's just what it is, but it's just another item that, I imagine we get a big bill from the city of Chaska, which
Yep.
has water, sewer, electric, everything in there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's probably several different statements that get mailed out.
Yep.
I'm just wondering, is it, why is that? Why is it over $1,000 through the first 4 months of the year?
Sure. Okay. We will get answers to those.
Okay. So looking for motion to accept the treasurer's report?
I make a motion that we accept the report as submitted.
All right. We have a motion, do I hear a second?
A second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Now to the management report.
Hey.
I just wanted to get to it.
Yeah. All right, the first is financial statements. Everything's pretty straightforward there, if anyone has any questions about that. Operating funds, we're still have a great expenses under budget, which is good. Board directives, 2018 calendar. One thing I did want to update is that we had our spring cleanup on Saturday. I talked to Paul Benz today, they picked up around 2,100 bags. We did have a lot left behind, but we did talk to Paul about that today, and he thinks maybe not everybody has them out by 8, and so they get missed. But we did pick up a lot more on yesterday.
So does he come back out or do we do it?
We do it,
Okay, understood.
because otherwise we pay by the hour, so.
Yeah, I understand.
These guys go out and do it. Fall, there was 5,000 bags, which fall is usually a bigger time anyways, but we had 2,100 bags, which is pretty average, so. Sounded like it was pretty successful. We only had, I think, 2 phone calls, people that were missed. Otherwise, we just went and picked up if they had it out. picked it up.
So they did totally miss our neighborhood in Clover, and we had ours out Friday night. So
Yeah.
I don't know, it just wasn't on their radar.
I know, there seems like there was a couple streets that got missed. I sent it to him, and he called us and said, you know, he feels like some people just maybe didn't, but I think they just, you know, they start at 7:30 in the morning, they go till 5, and they go so fast, sometimes they just forget a street
Right.
for whatever reason, so hopefully people understand they can just call us, and we'll come pick it up the next day, so. Next board meeting, June 12th here at the Chambers. Encompass update, Steven, Steven and Stefan is really.
Sorry, Carrie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The change of ownership report, I think that this is like maybe the 3rd time we've seen it in a packet. Do you just want to bring the board through kind of what that is and what that entails?
I can try, because this
Okay.
is Steven, but, so basically, anytime there's an ownership change and we send out a welcome packet, then that's what we get reported. So we can look at that in Caliber, which is our system, showing how many people received an updated letter that month on change of ownership.
So how do we find these out?
So basically, when somebody sells their home, the title company should be sending warranty deed to Gasson,
Okay.
and then Gasson then changes ownership with that warranty deed, and then they get a welcome packet. The new owners will get a welcome packet, and that's the letter that says change of ownership letter.
Okay. Is there anything that gets done in the process of like getting their dues current letter and all that kind of stuff?
That's
within
all
the title
done
company?
prior to closing.
Prior to closing, okay.
Yep, so like people contact me all the time and say, you know, we're closing, we need a dues current letter, whatever. They use HomeWise Docs, which is the outsourced system that we use.
Okay.
They get their settlement state, or their resale disclosure, dues current, all of that stuff that they need. That gets processed with the title company. There still seems to be times where the title company's not reporting that, or people don't report that they're part of an association, and it seems like a lot of it sometimes is some of these bad debt.
Does Gaston have, you know, relationships, not relationships, but with these title companies that are obviously sending us these,
Mm-hmm.
you know, forms and documents that they're requesting from us in terms
Yep.
of that? Is there a list that you have to, you know, that you work with them and you stay engaged with them to kind of follow up on, you know, Jonathan Association, just to keep them engaged on,
Right.
hey, you know, if you have any new title people coming in, or, you know, just make sure that you know that the Jonathan Association,
Right.
you know, you need to come to us for all these things.
Well,
'Cause I
there's so
think-
many title companies out there, and some people might be coming from a different state, so they use a title company from different areas. It might be Minneapolis, because that's where they're coming from, or whatever. So it does get confusing. Like, I just had a phone call today, somebody that's closing on Thursday from Mill Pond, and she just found out that he's part of Mill Pond and has a sub-association. She goes, we had no idea. We're closing Thursday. I said, well, you know, that's what the title companies are supposed to do, is research that and look for the current dues. It doesn't always happen, but I would say most of the time it does. Whether the relationship with Gasson, I'd have to ask Stephen that, because I'm not there, so I don't carry that area.
I'm just trying to get
Sure.
better educated on the subject, because this is something that, you know, as we've talked about in the months past, it can sometimes have negative implications for us as an association. So the more we understand, as all of us can understand it, the
Yep.
better, I think.
Could I challenge the board to think about this, that we used to process these in-house, if you will, meaning they were handled by somebody at Gasson. So we had direct access to what homes were requested. And then this was outsourced, I believe by a decision of a portfolio manager at some point. It was outsourced with HomeWise. So I would question whether there's an information sharing release form between HomeWise and Gasson. And if that's the case, we would know what houses it would still wouldn't fix the issue, but it would give us kind of an idea of what houses possibly have turned over.
So I think I can answer that question, just having been a community manager. HomeWise is kind of they're responsible for a separate part of this. The title company is the one that calls and cannot do the closing until they get the dues current letter. So HomeWise is, they're really just brokering documents. That's all they're doing. But the title company is the one that we, and I don't think, so my perspective is that we can go back, like if there's like $1,200, like we were on that one sale that was done, we can go back and call the title company and say, hey, or go after the current owner and say, you have title insurance, this is money that was owed, and, because you have title insurance, you can go back to your title company and then that owner can work it out. I mean, and I would be interested in sitting down, maybe with Amy and just kind of trying to hammer that out.
Sure.
Probably figure it out in 20 minutes. But I don't think there's anything that we need to do proactively, because 99.9% of the time, it's the title company's call after the dues current. It's just that, I think that bad debt list that we had, there were probably, most of them were, where we didn't get paid was foreclosures, bankruptcies, and there's nothing that we can really do on that. But the ones that are just, sales, I would like to see us, when we're out more than $1,000 or more than 500 or something like that, then, take the time to do the follow-up with the title company.
Sure.
But that was like, I don't think we had written off bad debt in, like 3 years?
3 years, I think.
So in 3 years, there were probably 5 that slipped through the cracks that we could, one of them was only $185, one was $1,200. But, I would like maybe the finance committee to sit down with Stephen or Amy or something and try to figure out what we can do when we find out after the fact. And follow up quickly instead of like, I don't know when that closing was, I think it was like 2 years ago, but rather than wait 2 years after the closing, it's a conversation worth having, but I don't.
And I think, Judith, that speaks to my point, is that if you know what homes are going to turn, if you will, you would know 3 or 6 months later, if it didn't close, that perhaps there's a possible situation before you get to the 2-year mark.
Right. So I mean, usually they're already on the delinquent list anyway. So if they're closed and they're on the delinquent list, that's where there is some way to deal with this. It's just, we just need to sit down.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd try to bring that up because again, it's in the board packet. I thought it'd be a good time to, dip our toes into the discussion a little bit more, just so we can better understand this process. Obviously, you guys know change of ownership. You're reporting it to us, but what's behind that? What does it mean? What is the process by which that gets carried out? And then what do you do in the months after to ensure that actually it did go and close and you have a new homeowner in that property?
Well, it seems like, and I know we don't want to take too much time on this, but it seems like every month when we do that change of ownership, if we could just kind of look at that list and compare it to the delinquency list and see, because there's 2 pieces of information that we had. Homes that changed hands that particular month, just compare those names, however there may be 10 or 5 or whatever, to the delinquency list and just see if any of those are on there. And that's kind of where we can start.
Okay.
So what is the policy now? I mean, you mentioned that there's some bad debt or some write-offs, but I didn't see that so far this year. So is there a threshold that is written off and not collected currently?
So we have a list that Stephen has been, Stephen presented to us in the last board packet. And we didn't write it off because the finance committee was going to meet first and kind of talk about this process. On that list for like over the past 3 years, there were maybe 5 of them that were just regular sales. They weren't bankruptcies, they weren't foreclosures, where the home was sold and these folks were on the delinquent list and
So,
and so.
Stefan, the list is very similar to what we've seen going back about 2 years. They're still on there.
Yeah, so my question is what's the current policy, and are those being collected, or is that just in limbo? Or that's what the finance committee is gonna determine?
So it's bad debt to be written off at this point.
It's in limbo.
It's in limbo as far as those like 5 homes over this regular, that's,
There'd be claims against the title insurance company.
Right.
Right, so we want to write that off.
right.
We want to fulfill.
Or
Yeah.
if we can spend $300 to go and get $1,500, then there's a business case to go and do it. That's what I think the committee should discuss too.
Right.
I'm just speaking out loud.
Exactly, no, and I think that we could probably go ahead and vote to write off all foreclosures and bankruptcies. I have no problem with that. It's just the 5 or 6 that were sold without, that were not. I'd like to have a conversation maybe with Stephen and Amy and the finance committee, whoever.
Sure.
It makes sense to
Okay.
kind of just say, what can we do to follow up with these people? It's just a question.
Okay. All right. Encompass update.
All right, so Stephen reached out to them, and they did not have a contract with Natalie, so there is no contract there, but they did update the plans, if you can see on 24, 25, that are a lot better than the originals that we got.
So can I just interrupt
Yeah.
for a second? I would like to have this conversation as a board about why this happened, this work happened without a contract. That is so foreign to me to think that we would just shoot off that the manager would just shoot off an email to Encompass and say, because there's no specifics about what we were, something like this where we're gonna be paying homeowner money, it just makes sense that we have a contract for that. So I really don't want to see this happening, and I just want to raise that point. And I don't know, maybe I need discussion from the rest of the board, but,
I think we know better.
we need a contract, and in addition to that, my request would be that the manager not sign the contract, that the president sign the
I
contract.
agree.
Typically, that's what we would do.
Typically, we do.
Right,
Okay.
so just,
So is the issue the $2,500 spending limit, and that's how this was done locally, or? Here's my question is, how much have we even spent on this project so far?
I would have to look it up, but I think with Encompass was like
No, it-
$2,000.
So their first work they gave us was $2,000?
I believe so. I'll be honest, Natalie was part of this, and I was not included on it. So until the plans came back and they weren't acceptable, and they were presented a couple months ago, then Natalie was no longer here. We looked into it deeper. Stephen said this is just unacceptable, so they made him get better plans without any cost. But originally, it was talking about the Karen House remodeling and taking out some walls to open it up. That's how it all started. But I agree, it was money that shouldn't have been spent.
So, and we've paid those already?
I believe so.
So there's really 2 issues.
Well, one issue is that the whole idea of what's in that $2,500 spending limit, right? We don't have a purchasing policy as a board or as an association. We have this loosely guarded, guideline of, hey, yeah, you can go out and spend up to this amount. But really, if I recall, a lot of that was for like pieces of equipment. The one thing that comes back to mind is a generator we needed to buy because it was like just over the spending limit or something like that. And we said, well, let's move that up. But that's something that it's equipment, it's a capital purchase.
Right.
It's not just anything. It's not like, well, I can go out and buy $2,400 worth of tennis shoes because, I want some, we need shoes, or we need work boots, or we need this, or we need that.
It's just like something like this, you
Yeah.
need to have a scope, you need to have a contract so that you know why they're going out there. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, I understand that this, anyway, just going forward, I just felt the necessity to say that it's just really important to have, not only have a contract, so that
Yep.
everybody's on the same page as far as what work is gonna be done, but I also think it's really important for the board president to sign it and not the manager, and
Agree.
I know that in the I'll make a very vague statement. In the past, some associations have given leniency and let the manager sign all the contracts to expedite things. But I just think it's a good idea for the board president to sign it.
I agree.
I mean, I'm looking for input from the rest of the board. This isn't just up to me.
And no one's disagreeing with you. I think what we're trying to get to, though, is when it comes to spending money, right? Contract's one thing, but we also have this loosely
Right.
defined limit on what management can go and make a purchase on. You know what I mean? So there's a disconnect there on what's appropriate, right, to be spent in that regard, and then what's not appropriate. Something like professional services, yeah, we'd want to have, you know, some T's and C's lined up to say that, yeah, we know what we're getting, this is what we want, you know, and we know better. So we need a purchasing policy.
Can I ask a question? What is the existing purchasing policy?
Obviously, $2,500 is the limit. Anything over $250 between us has to go to Stephen. He has to prove up to $2,500.
So this conversation really is with the portfolio manager,
Okay.
between 251 and 2,500, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think we can also say that that it's just really important that anytime we contract with a professional, that we have some kind of, that we have a contract.
I agree.
So I'd make a motion that from this day forward, any services of $1,000 or greater needs to be done by contract. That would be signed by the president.
Okay.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Do we need a board resolution? I mean, how do we memorialize this? It's one
Yeah.
thing
Minutes.
to have to,
No, we need more than that.
I don't know.
So further discussion, I would say that I think that Justin's on the right track as far as a purchasing policy, and that purchasing policy could be adopted through the board resolution. But until that's drafted, I think this would provide direction in the meantime,
Yeah.
and the minutes would memorialize it. But I think purchasing policy needs to be adopted.
Okay, explain this better. 250 to 2,500, you have to have Stephen okay it.
Correct.
But you're saying $1,000
So-
instead of the 25.
That's just, so there's purchases, and then there's like, when we contract for professional services, where Stefan is proposing that if it's in excess of $1,000, that it's signed by the board
I
president.
got that, but then what's that do with the 250?
That's a gas and policy.
Okay.
That's their internal policy.
No.
So this isn't, if they need to go out and buy a hammer, you know, we aren't saying we gotta get involved in that. We're just saying if we're going out for a website, if we're going out for professional services to get scopes of work done, plans, all these things, et cetera, that's when a board president has to be the one to sign off on it.
So that would still give them autonomy to do their job.
Absolutely.
To figure out who they should contract with, but it needs to come back to some oversight from the board, through the board president in that case, even though it's under a $20 limit. So, and then we hopefully wouldn't be in this position with this engineering firm.
Yeah, you'd think they would want a contract too.
I know. It was a very,
And here's my second, remember I said there was two issues? Really, how did the invoice get paid with substandard work? Like, that would not meet the quality of work that we received first time around. To me, I would never pay the invoice.
I agree.
I would have said, what you provided is unacceptable with or without a contract. Does this meet your professional standard? And if the answer is yes, it's a
We'd have to
different-
look at the
different
dates.
issue.
We'd have to look at the pay dates and everything like that to see if what we
And I
got in the revised plans, you know, that was, if we paid after that or before that. I don't know the answer to that.
Did these revised plans just come now?
Yes.
We just got them the board packet today.
Right.
But it's, the managers approved the invoices, and, it depends on who approved it. I don't know at what point, there was a transition point.
Yeah, I don't know.
Would you agree, though, at some point, there needs to be some accountability? The work provided originally was unacceptable. I mean, everyone agrees with that. The work provided was unacceptable, with or without a contract. I would not have expected that from a professional firm.
Right, and so what I'm saying is it went from Natalie to someone else kind of managing in between, and then Steve was assigned. And so at some point when the invoices came through, somebody who didn't know that it was unacceptable signed off on it.
But-
I mean, the one thing I. so
But
I
that goes
agree-
back to having a policy in place.
Right.
You know,
So so obviously transitions are always, you have more of a chance. So one thing I will say is Encompass is a reputable company and they always stand by their work. So I'm grateful that it was Encompass that we were working with instead of some other
Sure.
company.
Judith, they didn't even go in the basement. They didn't know there was a basement.
I'm surprised by that.
I mean, when we're talking about the load of the building and not even going in the basement to see where the foundation was, to me, it doesn't meet the professional standard.
Right. I agree with that.
But-
But yeah. so
It's
the
surprising.
same- Right.
Okay, all right, moving on.
There's a motion on the table, actually.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Get a
Stephen
little
moved,
ahead of ourselves. I
Stephen
got a
moved.
baby at home, sorry about that.
Stephen
not
moved
getting
from
any
this
sleep at
date
night.
on, $1,000 be signed by the principal.
Okay, thank you for that point of order.
Yeah, now we need a
We had
second.
a motion, do I hear a second?
I think I made a second.
Okay, we had our further discussion. Call a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right.
All right, garden committee update.
I'm sorry,
Amy, do
we
you
never
want-
talked
oh,
about Encompass. We got sidetracked.
Okay,
Because there's a couple options here, right?
so the Karen House remodel,
Well, we haven't gotten to that part yet.
Oh,
That's coming under, I think,
Okay, yeah, so that was just an
Board
update
action.
to see where we were
Oh.
at from the
Yep.
last meeting.
it was just an update on, Judith had requested getting a contract, so it was just an update on that. So that'll come up, unless you want to talk about it now.
Let's just get through the manager report.
Okay. So the next thing is the garden committee meeting update, which is on page 30. Amy, do you want to update on that? Or,
Yep, so the garden committee met with Carver County and we talked about a grant that's available. And it's only available to cover the material cost of setting up the garden. They wouldn't cover the ongoing maintenance of the garden. That would be either the association or the city if we end up doing the partnership. And I think one important point that came out of the meeting is the challenge of having land available, suitable land too. Currently where the garden plots are located, it's not accessible, which makes it a challenge to garden down there. So we brainstormed about potential ideas using school land, because during the summer, the kids won't be in school, so we could potentially do that with agreement with the school. And we also, I think Judy was gonna look at
I did talk to
one of the local farmers, if he was willing. And we also talked about church property. We didn't really go any further on that, so I don't know if any board members have ideas on church property available that they would allow us to have gardens there. I know an example is in Eden Prairie, they have garden plots at one of the churches there. And, oh, and then the other thing that we talked about as a board is partnering with the city of Chaska and seeing whether or not they have any interest in possibly providing some of their city park land. And we're waiting on an update. Carver County was gonna talk with the city to see their interest. So the garden committee hopes to meet with Carver County again to kind of get an update of all these land opportunities that we brainstormed. And then we would go from there to see whether or not we should apply for the grant, if it makes sense, and decide from there. So I don't know if the board has any thoughts on that or questions.
No, I like what I see, I like what I hear.
What parcels were considered inside of Jonathan?
Inside of Jonathan, Friendship Park, I think, is a city park. Inside of Jonathan, we really struggled with having land available, and that's why we went to the city to see if they wanted to partnership with the association.
We did a bunch of renovations on the pavilion, and there's water down there, and there's a large green space. We
That
have
was
25
pretty
acres
thought
total
that.
down there.
We talked about that.
And then there's also area over by where there's like a baseball field, but it's underwater, it's kind of low. But not where the horseshoe pits are, but that open green space where we used to do the picnics for when we used to score the Boy Scouts.
That's probably where the community band was set up during the 4th of July celebration?
Yeah, in that area there.
Isn't it pretty shady though?
That area gets a lot of sun.
And there's water available.
Yeah, there's water in the pavilion.
I mean, we could consider that.
You just have the issue with getting,
Accessibility
Yeah.
again, yeah.
Same thing, almost worse.
and that's the one thing with Jonathan is that we're very much we were built around kind of an agricultural concept, right? We built a city within this vast green space, right? It wasn't a concrete jungle
No.
with parking lots and, steel chain link fences. It is challenging. I don't know how you get over that accessibility issue. I think you have that accessibility with everything in Jonathan. We don't have tot lots that have parking lots at them. We have the parking lot for a basketball court. It's a very small parking lot, but again, there's just not a lot of area that we have available.
And I would suggest that the garden committee consider the density of the housing when determining a potential area. There's a lot of single-family homes that, some of the community gardens really isn't necessarily originally driven towards that because they have their own dirt. A lot of the high-density housing that doesn't have their own land might be an option.
Yeah, one thing I did notice when we get to the Juliet Park, there's a plot of land. I'm like, well, how large is this? Could the garden plots go there? I just don't know how large that is. And that would have accessible parking on the street.
What about water?
Water, yeah, we would have to, water, I think anywhere we go, we'd probably have to get that hooked up, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think the city was pretty knowledgeable and pretty interested. So, and we learned a lot.
Yeah,
We
there was a
really
lot
did.
of great brainstorming.
Yeah.
So we hope to meet in the next month, and we should have more information then at the next board meeting.
All right, can we move on? All right, thank you, Amy, thank you, ladies. Where are we here? Property visit?
Yep. So we were a little delayed this year with neighborhood assessments because we had a blizzard in the middle of April, but we ended up getting them done yesterday. I emailed them out today. Hopefully everybody got that. We have a lot of things that we added. I would say the majority of it is mail houses that need some cleaning up, power washing, painting. So we're gonna kind of use that as a guide along with our maintenance schedule to kind of get us through the summer. Once you guys get a chance to look at that, if you have any questions or feel like we maybe missed something that needs to be added, just let us know.
Do you have a form letter that you send out to homeowners if they all have the same issue? Do you use a form letter?
What do you mean?
Well, my neighbor, I won't say a name, but she received a letter and it was quite unprofessional.
Are you talking about a violation letter?
Yes,
Yeah, it's a form letter that comes from Gasson.
okay. Well, then, I'm sure it was okay.
We can talk about it often.
Okay.
This is for property visits for, as far as neighborhood assessments and what needs to be done this summer. So,
So at what point do we decide on the workforce? And does the board decide that after you do these assessments? I guess I don't know the process.
well, basically, we just go through, look at what really needs to be done. We kind of try to number it by importance, which has the most, efficient, like what needs to be done now, what needs to be later. And we try to just, last year we set up a system between a 1 and a 4, 1 being the worst, 4 being the greatest. And just try to keep notes of when things were updated, whether they were painted, a new roof on a mail house or new trail or whatever. And we just try to plug that into our calendar and get as much done as we can, but we kind of put it on necessity of when we feel like it needs to be done. There's some mail houses that are in bad shape that are like, we need them done this year. Some that can maybe hold off another year. So that's just kind of how we have been numbering them.
And then how is the decision made on additional, like, workforce needed to get this completed? How do we decide? Have we had summer help in the past?
We have, so this year, if I recall, we budgeted a set amount for contract help, if you will. And, you know, in terms of like the ultimate decision on how many staff to hire, you know, I think the board would have the ultimate approval on that. So I think what we'd look for in the past was more of a proposal from management to come forward and say, this is what we have in terms of our work plan. We think it's gonna take this amount of people, but it all comes back to what do we have budgeted?
And
So
I
I
guess
think for
my-
this year, we had around $20,000 budgeted for
Okay.
contract help, if you will.
And I guess what I'm really trying to get at is, like, it's May, so when do we decide to hire someone? Do we already have people that are willing, or we have to go through like a hiring
I
process?
believe we do have someone that we've, a temporary worker that we've hired in years past,
Okay.
that they've just been, they've stuck with
They were
us,
available.
so to speak.
Okay.
Started 2 weeks ago.
He
so-
started, okay,
Yep.
he started
Oh,
2
okay.
weeks ago.
Yep. So as soon as the weather gets nice and the workload starts adding up, then we just hire him back. In the years past, we've had anywhere from 1 to 3 helpers, and then we have a gardener. This year, we're planning on the 1 and the gardener.
Okay,
We'll see how we go.
okay,
We'll see how the budget, we just monthly keep a budget. You know, we know what the bottom line is, and if we have extra wiggle room and we need some help, we maybe can get a temp in, but as of
Okay.
now, we're just planning on the 1 gardener and the 1 helper.
And Amy, you bring up a good question, and we've talked about this for the last few years. And I'd like to commend management for making inroads on this. So there was a board directive last year to have the assessment done by May, which they completed successfully. It was also our recommendation last year that they develop a work plan, which Vern had already put together, and I think we've seen a month or 2 ago,
Yep.
maybe 2 months ago already. So he was well ahead of that, which is a vast improvement over prior years. And our previous conversations revolved around, when will the assessment be done? Will they use the assessment to develop a work plan on a monthly and then weekly basis?
Yep.
And then they can recap what their successes that they've completed through the board packet process. And then we as a board would evaluate in the fall when we get to budgeting, based on their fall assessment of the property, of how many dollars should need to be set aside for the following year. But Carrie clearly identified that they have to get out there early, they have to do the assessment, they then take a few days or a week, go back, map it all out on paper, and then they decide how much staff they need to accomplish the work that they decided that they need to do based on their assessment.
Okay.
But, yeah, they've come a long ways to put that process in place, and we're just starting to see the fruit of their labor, so
yeah,
thank you for doing that.
nice job.
Anything else on the neighborhood assessments?
Nope.
All right, number 4 is correspondence. If you guys have any questions, we send out, you know, all the letters between violation letters and welcome letters that are sent out. There was 278 last month. Email blast, Clint's kind of taking care of that. He sent out an email blast, I believe, for the garage sales and for the neighborhood cleanup. So anyone that signed up to be on that email blast has received that email. Page 45, City of Chaska sent out the notice for tomorrow night, I believe. Yep, for the Planning Commission for the new port and development that's proposing to put up, I think it's 50, is it 50 or 80?
58.
58 homes, 85, 58. So that's there if anyone wants to attend tomorrow and hear more about that.
Can I interrupt and make a comment about Stefan and I and Amy and Kay attended that Horton
Mhm.
meeting? And, you know, one thing that we came away with was the fact that the plan as it sits does not have any plan for a playground.
Mm.
And we just voiced our opinion that we thought that was really important that they add that into the plan because
Mhm.
it's, you know, could be but right up against the Clover neighborhoods, and we're gonna have 4 tot lots there, and if the 58 homes do not have their own tot lot, then they're gonna be using
Sure.
Jonathan playground area, so, just letting everybody know that that's something that's on our radar.
Mail stations too.
Mm.
They hadn't quite decided where the mail station would be, or if it
Okay.
was, I mean, if it was nowhere on the plan.
Right, and they do plan on having boulevard trees, so Stefan pointed out, it's not gonna be part of Jonathan, and it's not, so it'll be interesting when we, you know, what arrangement they make with the city for, their boulevard trees, but, and when we send vendors out there, we're gonna have to make sure they understand
Sure.
where we.
So they are not going to be part of Jonathan?
No,
Okay.
Well, I mean, that's really
We don't
for the
know.
board to decide.
no, it's not, I mean, they're not on the title, and we cannot add neighborhoods to Jonathan without 2/3 majority of all homeowners in the association. So we can't annex them in.
So you're saying we can't do the annexation, or you're saying we can't receive the 2/3?
Oh. I mean, I don't, so unless you want to get 2/3 majority of, you know, I mean, if, you know, we could have Helmuth write up a proposal that and we should make sure at that point that we say that we want to sell the Idle House too. We could just lump it all
Well,
into.
Drew, here's my thing, is just, I mean, I just don't think it's fair for us to make a blanket statement that we can't do that. I think that that would be something that the board should discuss, probably in closed session, because it would involve a legal process, and we would have the right to close a meeting for that. But just to assume that, no, that's not the case, I mean, there's, you know, we all are gonna have different opinions, but there may be some precedent that they would utilize our services based on their proximity, whether we can get the 2/3 vote or not.
Okay,
There's
so
another
I'll
question.
restate that to say that when you look at our documents state that we can't take on new property without a 2/3 majority vote of all of the homeowners. So whether or not that can happen is certainly up for discussion.
Thanks for going to that, Barbara.
So, you know, if anybody wants to volunteer to go to the planning commission meeting tomorrow night,
I'll definitely be there.
okay.
This butts up right to my
Right.
house, so I'm
Right.
very interested
Yeah.
in, yeah.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt, I'm sorry.
It's all right. All right, next item is action items. Number 1 on page 48 is Juliet Park. There's a lot of information on this. We got 3 different vendors to come in. We have all different kinds of opinions, pricing as to where it should be located, which everybody's in pretty much agreement on that. Management is recommending to stick with Miracle, which is Miracle Option 1, which is on page 51. I believe. The reasoning for that is, did everyone see the map on page 50 as to where we're kind of looking to locate this? We wanted to put it up, if you would say north of there, away from the trees, but there's too much of a slant. We'd have to do a lot of grading, which would cost a lot of extra money. So this area is flat, so we're hoping to put it in there, plus we're hoping the trees would provide some shade for kids playing and parents. So that is the area that we're looking, and that's, like I said, everybody was in agreement on putting it there. Option 1 from Miracle, with the size that it is, would fit in there perfectly. Anything, option 2 or 3 would be bigger, and we'd have to take out trees, and we don't want to have to take out trees. So that is kind of our suggestion. Does anyone have questions on anything? They did provide these nice boards in front of you guys as kind of a visual as to what they're thinking. The other 2 companies did a good job too. Company 2 had no taxes or something, which I couldn't
That seemed a
believe.
little odd, but
Yeah, I did too, and I questioned them on it, and they said that there wasn't. And then company 3 didn't have any shipping because they're coming out of Texas. So they said anyone out of Texas doesn't have to pay shipping. I'm not sure on that either, but, so it was different prices there, but option 1 with Miracle is still the best value.
It's also the closest to that.
Closest to the budget thing,
Yeah.
yep.
Well, I do have a question. As I was looking at all three of them,
Uh-huh.
so Miracle, basically all three of their options, but their wood fiber charge is $5,230.51.
Yep.
So American Parks, their wood fiber is $23.70.
Yep, everybody's different.
And,
I saw that too.
right, but we're talking about the same amount of area, pretty much.
I'm guessing that's how some companies make up their different prices. They might put their equipment cheaper to make it look like, ooh, you're getting a great deal on the equipment, but then they make up their price in fiber or whatever.
Well, there's labor and there's material.
Yep,
So the install is half the price of
yep.
American.
Mhm.
Yeah,
The
American's
equipment on
installs way more.
Midwest is $10,000 more.
So they're all a little different, but similar as far as the install on the wood fiber
Right.
and stuff, if you
Some of the
balanced it
equipment's
out.
more expensive, but then their wood fibers or their installs up or down. So bottom line is kind of where you gotta look, I guess.
And then, other question I have is that Stefan mentioned, I think just when we were talking, that are we gonna have to replace sod once they go through and put this in? And if
I-
they do,
Guess I don't know that.
yeah, who's paying for the sod and the labor for that?
We've never done a playground yet, so.
Yeah, I know.
I guess that's a question. I mean, this is really close to the road, so there shouldn't be a ton of sod damage, but I guess that's something I'd have to ask them.
Well, what's there now? Sod?
It's grass.
Grass? Okay.
Yep.
Last time it was almost 5,000
I know you
for
said
the
that.
sod overruns, I think it was in, I forget what neighborhood it was, but it's a small one.
To replace
Which,
sod.
this is double the size
Uh-huh.
than the one that I'm thinking of. And then I saw you identified benches, but trash receptacles, was that?
There's one up there, but there isn't one down by there, so
I
we
mean-
probably, and I have two in. I don't know if we need two right away. We can always add more if we need it. So I just put in some pricing for that. I didn't put in pricing for receptacles. There's one up here, right? Up here?
Oh, on the
But-
far side?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, but that's,
but that's,
yeah, I mean, you're probably gonna
You'd
need
want
two,
one
away.
this looks like a big tot lot. You
Yeah.
might need
Yeah.
one on each side, and you might need 2, 4, 5 benches, maybe 4 benches. Looks like you got 3.
No.
I just have two in there,
Because
one on each
one's going to
side.
the other.
The other part is the mail house, and then there's a bench
Oh.
up on top.
Yeah. So,
And then, was the cost of the bench not in our 30,000, Judy? The budget that we set?
I think we
Do
just,
have any
I think we
bench-
just did a 30,000 budget. I don't know if it included what it included.
No, it's just a tot lot. So like, the benches and receptacles would be,
Over and above.
they'd be a different, it wasn't part of the reserve study. The reserve study is a tot lot.
Right?
Okay, okay.
so from a financial standpoint for ongoing maintenance, this will be wood chipped? So does that need to be done every other year?
They say every 3 to 5. It just depends, I think, on the weather and how much it gets used and how much.
How much wood chips have we replaced in Jonathan since you've been here?
Well, since I've been here, just the one cart in Clover.
Yeah, we don't replace wood chips.
No, not very often. Like, I know the city did at Friendship Park, but they just did, a couple, like if it was low here, they put in some fresh here, fresh there, fresh there.
We're talking a couple $100 worth of
Yeah.
chips.
Yeah, not very much.
Okay.
So I would make a recommendation to the board that they figure at least another $5,000 for benches and trash cans and sod. So you get an idea of what your overall expense will be. Permitting fees.
So I make a motion that we go with Miracle 1, option 1.
I can second that.
Great, motion and a second. Call a vote, all in favor?
Hold on.
Oh, any,
I'd like to amend that motion to include a budget of up to $37,000, all in, including sod repair, benches, trash can receptacles, miscellaneous as needed. up to 37. That'll give them about 5,000. I just would hate to see this project not be complete all at once.
We've learned that.
So, and I will say that one of the neighbors called me today and said that they would love it if, at some point, and if it's not in the budget for this year, maybe next year, because I don't think there's anything wrong with phasing things in. They would like to have some picnic tables in that area, you know, somewhere where they could,
Yep.
where moms and dads could bring.
Yeah, especially with the trees, that would be really nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that could be part of that up to amount.
Right, and maybe picnic tables would be better than benches, because you can still sit and you can also have lunch. Skip the bench and just do picnic tables.
I feel like that $5,000 contingency kind of takes care of benches and receptacles but
I think for a start, you can always add down the road if people complaining there's not enough room.
Right.
yeah. Okay.
Did they have any idea when they would be able to do the
Install.
project?
They said it's up to 6 months, or 6 months, 6 weeks for delivery, and then they said about a week to install.
Okay.
So looking like mid-July, as soon as we give them the okay. And obviously, the earlier the better, because they're gonna get busy.
When's the next newsletter?
September.
September? I would like to see a kind of a little grand opening or a little commemoration event around that. I think that would be kind of cool.
I'd like to see a little bit of branding there too, so that it's not there might be the perception that it's a city-provided amenity.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
It might be beneficial for us.
So maybe we could put a sign there that says Juliet Park with our new logo.
Well, I noticed there was a sign in the design. Do you know what's on that sign? Is it rules or is it?
Safety.
Oh, safety.
It's a
warning.
safety, yeah, safety panel.
No fun stuff.
Well, perhaps I could count on someone to show their support and second the amendment.
I second the amendment.
All right. We have an amended motion and a second. Any further discussion? Further discussion? Call a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. So I imagine there'll be a contract that needs to be signed for that? Okay, we'll do that offline.
Yep, sounds good. Kind of adding on to that real quick, Neighborhood 3 was also on our reserve study to get completed. We had a couple companies come out, there's really not a lot of room because of the ADA safety zones that you have to have per unit. Miracle did come out and they think that they can put, well, they know they can put a, I forget what they call it, but it's like basically a toddler teeter-totter. It doesn't go up real high. They could put that in a couple panels, which they're called learning panels. So one's a tic-tac-toe, where kids can play at tic-tac-toe. One was a sign language sign, they're learning panels. If they put that on the same order as the Juliet Park, this would be obviously additional money on top of the 37 that you just did. I should have brought this up before. If we wanted to add something to Neighborhood 3. Both companies that came out suggested we leave the equipment that's there. It's not that bad a shape. It's just there's no room to add anything additional. So the small area and the big tree that's there. So if we wanted to update Neighborhood 3 and add those pieces of equipment, the total was on page 88, which was the $37, or $37,068. That's for the two neighborhoods. That'd be for Juliet.
Oh, so it's the delta, it's the 5,000.
Correct, because then you save on shipping.
3,500? 3180.
Let's see here.
37. So 5,200.
5,200.
So you're asking for
Yes.
5,200.
Page 84 shows the breakdown. Juliet is 31,815, and then the tot lot 3 is 5252. Your
We
total,
approved Julia already,
yep,
right? So you're asking for 5,200.
for neighborhood 3, if you guys want to approve
Does
that.
that include, is there rock there or chips there now?
There's rock there.
And there's plenty of rock, it's in good
Yep.
shape, equipment's in good shape. Benches are old or new benches?
He's gonna put a new bench in there. It's just a wooden bench that would just need some new wood on it. So that's kind of an additional price on that, but that shouldn't cost much. That just needs, that was on our neighborhood assessment to get done anyways.
What was our full budget that we had for the tool? Like
57.
57,000, I think.
So I'd make a motion that we approve 50, up to $5,500 for neighborhood 3 top lot refurbishment.
A second?
Any further discussion? Call a vote, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. So I would just say that for accounting purposes, I'd like to see it on a different contract or a different PO or invoice.
Sure.
It's different, so
Yeah, I know it was kind of confusing that way, but he said
that's fine.
for shipping reasons, that's why he did
Yep,
it
that's
that way.
fine.
And then can I ask a question? I noticed that you put some benches in here.
Uh-huh.
We identified some benches during our last replacement, and they have held up really well.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost like a hard plastic that
Are
curves
they-
back to it.
Are they green?
Nope, they're a tannish color.
Yeah.
I can think of over by the baseball field off of Hunter Mark. There's one you can see from the
Yeah,
road.
they're tan, sorry. I
Yeah,
thought they were-
tan.
Yeah.
And they've held up really, really well, and they were, I'd like to say $400 or $500.
Really? I couldn't find anything
Um,
really worth the price.
Vern, you've probably seen them around. We went through and did like 11 of them, I think.
Kids can't really destroy them.
Yes.
Isn't there one in neighborhood
Yep, and
one
they're
else?
completely maintenance-free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they work.
Sure.
I'd recommend,
I can try to look up old invoices and see if we can find where those were purchased from.
So on page 93, you have the 6-foot heritage recycled plastic bench. And I was kind of in favor of that one because it's recycled and it's plastic, but also because it has a heavy-duty cast aluminum frame. So it won't rust or anything. I
Right.
don't,
And they can be screwed down too, so nobody
yeah, can walk
removes them like our outhouse or
Yeah.
down at the pavilion.
So maybe, is that the same type, or not?
actually, no, there's no sides to the
Oh,
the
okay.
benches. It's
Yep, I
like,
know
it's just like
exactly.
it's an ergonomic,
Yep.
I don't know how to describe it. They're very comfortable, and Vern attests to the fact that they're pretty durable.
Yep.
And they've been at least 5 years for some of them, I think they've been out there. And they look the same as when they went in.
But if we've had good success with those in the
Yeah, maybe we
past, maybe we should just go with those again.
Yeah.
Right. And they're half the price.
Yeah.
And they're 6 foot, 8 foot, 4 foot, we don't care, right? Whatever we use. Do we have a standard bench
I think they're
size?
5 or 6 feet, I think.
Yeah, 6 foot.
Most
is
of them are 6 feet.
standard.
4x6.
Okay. So in lieu of choosing a bench, we're kind of telling management to go and figure out whatever we used on those other ones and just go with those
Okay.
again. Okay.
Sounds good.
Especially if they're cheaper too,
Right.
it'd be good.
Are we gonna stay with just the 2 for Juliet and then 1 for neighborhood 3?
Well, we'll
or-
stick with whatever we can do under the budget, so,
Oh,
because we'll have to get some receptacles. I'll
Yeah.
probably start with 1, maybe 2, if it stays under budget.
Okay.
yeah, if you can get more benches under that price, that would be great.
Okay?
And a doggy pot, I'm assuming?
And what?
If there's no doggy pot there already.
Right. No, there, is there one up by the?
Juliet
There is.
Park there is, yeah.
Yeah. Up by that little scene area.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Anything else on that?
No.
All right, next item is approval for the canoe application, which is on page 96. We just made that couple of suggestions that you guys had made last meeting about Jonathan residents having up until April 1 and then after May 1, having non-residents have the availability with 11th month term. So that's what we came up with. If there's any suggestions how to change that.
I had a couple.
Okay.
I would think we should put, instead of, so on canoe rack locations will be assigned.
Yep.
I think we should, I would suggest putting canoe rack spots will be offered, just different words.
Okay.
Because we're really not gonna assign them, are we? There's just 6 there. Are we actually saying you get the bottom one, you
Well,
get
the
the
only
middle
reason I
one?
thought of that is if for some reason someone doesn't pick it up, like they would actually register it with us for, the fee, and then we have, just like the garden plot, so we know who's in plot 1, who's on.
Okay, so you are looking to number them.
Yeah.
Oh, you are
I
assigning them.
thought so, because
Okay.
that way if we have to contact them for some reason,
Okay, that
then we
makes
know,
perfect sense.
Justin Sharpen's in number 1 and Judith Bostrom's in number 2. Does that make sense?
Okay, then I'm fine with it the way
Okay.
it is.
Did legal look at this release, or is this something we drafted?
Nope, this is something we got off of Lake Ann Canoe Rental,
Yeah.
basically a
I
copy
think
of.
we were just looking to get this
Mhm.
done without having to spend any legal fees
Mhm.
on
I'm just thinking in consideration being allowed. I'm missing some words.
it. In consideration of being allowed?
And then after management company and its agents. I'm missing that its.
And its agents. Any other edits?
So what was the first sentence in consideration?
In consideration of being allowed.
And owner may be responsible,
Or
shouldn't
for.
owner will be?
Yeah.
It should be in consideration for being allowed.
In consideration for being allowed, okay.
Wording? Oops.
Don't let him.
I think we scratched the entire, everything that's in front of the comma, and we just start with the undersigned agrees that the Jonathan Association,
Yeah,
okay?
it's an even better edit.
Yes, okay.
Even
What was
better.
that now?
Okay, so my recommendation is that we scratch the entire first part of the sentence up until the comma and just start the document with the undersigned
Okay.
agrees that the
Okay.
Jonathan Association and its officers, management company, and agents.
Its agents.
Its agents.
Its agents, yeah.
Okay.
And down below, it says owner may be responsible, shouldn't the owner will be responsible?
Or leasee, right?
So you want may? I don't know if this is,
I don't know.
Will.
Sure, put will.
Yeah, of course
So
they
you
will.
use may or shall. Shall means must, may means might.
Leasing shall be responsible for removal and storage fees.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right.
repeat that one more time?
Leasing shall be responsible for removal and storage fees.
Okay.
All right. You can get it on the website and go to town on it.
Sounds good.
Carrie, did you have anybody call you out of that? Because I saw it was on there with the garage sale stuff. So check that out.
All right.
Okay.
Next item is the Karen House remodel. So obviously, we go back to the Encompass construction part of it. I guess the board needs to decide, do we want to go with that, or do we just want to do a minor facelift, or do we want to do nothing, is kind of what it's come down to. My recommendation would be to not do any construction. If we want to update the Karen House and possibly hold meetings there to maybe put in some better flooring, maybe put a little paint on the walls and get a new conference table. But I think beyond that, I don't know how much more we need. Maybe some new lighting, because it's dim lighting, some new entry furniture, but I mean, the desks are fine, stuff like that. There is suggestions I put in here for new furniture. Definitely doesn't need all that, but the main thing would be a conference table and chairs. It's the most expensive part on here, but that's our suggestion. The flooring is, there's a couple, one on 101 and 102 is some flooring. I got a third one in today. That one's the most expensive, so it's right around $6,500 or so, give or take, for flooring. But it's kind of a lot of flooring, so that would be to put in the vinyl, I forget what they call it, the press
Yeah,
vinyl.
sounds like it's a commercial grade
Yeah.
vinyl plank.
Yep. So basically, it's in your hands if you guys want to move forward with it, if you want to leave it, if we want to continue to do meetings here, move it there. It's kind of where we want to go.
So the objective was to remove the wing wall in order to
Just open it up.
open things up, and Vicki was be more accommodating for
Yep.
meetings. It just seems to me like if you wanted to do that, you could use that larger room
That's what we thought too, yep.
and not necessarily
the
have to
com-
break down.
I agree.
So, I like the idea of getting rid of the carpet and putting
Mm-hmm.
the vinyl flooring in there.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had $10,000 allocated or at least recommended by our reserve advisors in our updated reserve study. Again, that was more of a cosmetic
Yep.
facelift. Once we got into it, it sounds like, to me, when I look at starting to do construction and making changes to the house, we could be getting extremely expensive by doing that.
Yep.
It'd be a lot over $10,000, obviously.
Yep.
What is is there a sample of the flooring?
We have to go and pick out samples, but I thought before we did all that, we should just see if it's something we want to move forward with. And then I can bring in samples of that.
So $6 a square foot is just kind of the average price?
Yep, correct.
So,
For the square footage that's there, around 6,500 is the average.
so I'm questioning the need for a conference table right now because we're not holding our meetings there and though it seems like the table that we
Sure.
have is suitable.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, if we ever got to the point where we were having our meetings there regularly and we felt like we needed a bigger one, then
So what is preventing us from flip-flopping the furniture that's in the two rooms?
Nothing.
I mean, you
Perhaps
can-
we should flip-flop and then see what it's like having a meeting at that conference table.
Yeah, I was wondering, it sounds like a tight space.
Yeah.
And if residents come, how do we accommodate residents? Do we have the space for it with a large table?
I think if we flip-flopped and turned the table this way, I think it would be plenty of room, and then the back, the room where the conference table is now is where residents could sit.
Oh, okay.
The problem is I don't think that conference table is suitable for 9+2,
Right.
which we could have our own table. But 9 around the table's tight, so that's the only reason we suggested a bigger table. But like Judith said, we could start that way, and if meetings ever move there, it could be a year or two before we do, we add a conference
Because we
table.
have a contract here for another year.
Sure.
So, I mean, I guess I'm in favor of replacing the floor, doing the painting, any window coverings that you need, or,
Mhm.
you know, giving it a facelift. And if you wanna flip and take the copy machine and put it in that room and just do the flipping.
Yep.
Now, just in case, you know, we end up having a meeting.
Yep.
There, but I just don't really see the point in buying a conference
And to your point too, I mean,
quite yet.
do we need a new one? I mean, there's an office supply,
Sure.
you know, I mean, you know, it is, you go to business and stuff's for 30% the price.
Yeah.
We could source a used one.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Carrie, during the week, would you use that table? I mean, the
If
conference
we have
table?
meetings, we use it, like when vendors come in and stuff,
Yeah,
we use it.
yeah.
When Steven comes, we sit back there,
Mhm.
especially if Vern comes in and we have meetings, we always use that table.
So-
But it's plenty big for that.
No, I know, but so if we moved it into the other room, and we moved whatever, into the back part, would that appearance look nicer for
I think
people
so.
coming in? I think it would.
I think it would too. The one thing I would suggest adding to this, which I guess I don't have it in here, is, we talked about it, but is lighting, because the lighting's not the best. But if we flip-flop, it may be okay, because the front has all those windows.
Right,
It's that back room that's kind of dim, but if you're only using it for a copy room and stuff, it could be.
yeah, but it's raining out now and it's dark. It's
Right.
dark during the day too sometimes, so.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that maybe we forego buying new furniture, but the thought is that we need to, so the request by management is to look at giving the Karen House a little bit of a cosmetic remodel, new flooring, new painted walls, lighting. So is there a budgeted amount that we are looking to spend for that portion of everything? Or are we looking to table this for a little bit down the road?
Can I ask a clarifying question? So this flooring will be what areas? Will it be everything on the main level, including the bathroom?
Not the bathroom. We figured we'd keep the bathroom, but
What
everything
is the
up
flooring
to
that's in the bathroom now?
It's like a pergo,
Yeah.
wood flooring.
I remodeled that personally 5 years ago.
So the bathroom would stay, but up to the bathroom where that little area is, and the whole main floor. And the carpet's pretty dirty. We had it cleaned last year, but,
I think it's a great idea to take the carpet out.
mhm.
I think it's, you know, that's great. You'll also probably, you might wanna do some area rugs then too, so.
Yeah, we have some like coming in from the door all the way to the desk and maybe some through the hallway.
Especially in the winter, with
Yep.
salt coming in.
Did, Carrie, did you and I talked at some point about replacing that window?
Mhm.
Is that on the agenda? Is that not included in this? Is that separate?
We had a separate bid for that done last year. It's kind of expensive. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's necessary.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it still holds in heat and air, and do you think it needs to be replaced? I mean,
Is it
works,
leaky?
it's
Is the
the,
main
no,
thing?
I mean, it doesn't.
Oh.
It doesn't leak or
We're
anything.
we're not losing a lot of heat out of there.
Actually, I think it's almost better than some of the new windows that were put in. Yeah,
Oh,
because
okay.
it's the old-fashioned glass windows, you know, that slide. We don't open it, but we don't need to, so.
And so what about window treatment?
Window treatments, we took down the ones that are there, and we just have blinds in there.
Do you have blinds?
It's
Are they fine?
Yeah.
We don't need new ones? Okay.
So Carrie, it looks like if we subtracted the furniture costs and just approved flooring and painting,
Mhm.
that you're probably looking at about somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,000.
Mhm. Unless we added lighting, but, and then there's area rugs, but.
Yeah, so can we just like maybe vote on like maybe allowing up to $8,000 for a facelift? Does that make sense to?
My only concern would be is we haven't picked a floor yet,
No.
and we don't know what the paint color is gonna be like. I just wanna make sure that it's a coordinated effort,
Yeah.
that all of these appears they were done as, one project, it's in a, official office space.
Right.
What if we took the 8,000, but I'll come back in June with the $8,000 budget and present flooring and paint and everything up to $8,000?
Sounds good.
That sounds good.
Make a motion that we approve up to $8,000 for renovation of the Karen House.
We have a motion
I second.
and a second. Any further discussion? Call a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Number 4 is on page 98, sorry. Huh? Nope, 106. Stephen did this. He talked to an attorney that Gaston works with. This is for the resolution for the board of directors. This is a rough draft. Just wanted you guys to look over it, see if there's anything you wanted added, deleted. Do you have any questions about any of it?
And this came up, for anyone who might not be aware, I don't know if it was last month or.
April, yeah.
It was, okay,
Yeah.
all right, so the discussion that we had around it was more of our website, and then people opting in with their contact information and utilizing that for communication. It's pretty standard. Every organization should have a privacy policy.
Yep.
So, has there been some language adopted for the website when they opt in? Like, I agree here too, blah, 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 blah?
I think it's
Or is this
the,
just a resolution for us that will have a policy?
We'll have a policy now.
yep. I think when people sign up for the email, Clint sent out that email blast saying that they had to pretty much give permission with their email. So I get emails almost daily, it's MailChimp, saying that they've opted in to receive the email blast. This is more to protect you guys, saying that you're not gonna sell their emails or, that type of thing.
Okay.
What resolution number are we on?
We're at 24, this would be 25.
All right, so next month we could have this on the Jonathan resolution format
Okay?
to be presented for final approval.
Now, in the past, Secretary's always written the resolution. Do you want?
Oh, the secretary drafts the resolution?
Yep.
Yes. yeah.
Okay, so have Clint do that? Okay,
With this language.
yes. All right, number 5 is just kind of a heads up for Apple Award nominees. that we need to start thinking about. It's just on the calendar. If you guys have any recommendations, you want to email me, people that we should keep in mind. For 2017, I know Stefan, I think you had nominated somebody or last month. Just
Yeah,
kind of keep in mind.
And I have sad news to share that he actually passed this past weekend.
Oh, no.
What?
So he passed this past weekend.
Are you kidding me?
Services are on Saturday.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry to hear that.
So I would recommend the board consider perhaps honoring his service with
Posthumously?
naming the 4th of July fun run, or reaching out to his family and, yeah.
It's really sad.
Okay. That's sad. So if anyone has any nominees from here, you can just email them to me, or I can put a list together and we'll present that later on. Anything else on those? Collection reports, as you can see, the delinquencies are going down. We're gonna talk about more of this in closed session tonight. There's some Fuller's report included in here, which we had a lot more than usual, and delinquencies are on page 132 through 137. And that about does it, unless you have questions.
So, kind of jumped around here, sorry.
All right?
So we, all right, so there are trail improvements. We're gonna talk about that.
That's coming at new business, yep. This is just the management report.
Okay, understood.
So I assume that we're no longer need to discuss the professional services contract? Or is the idle house still need to be discussed?
So,
I saw that in here, was it page 38? Remember yeah, so starting on page 24, and so page 26 through the next few pages. 26 through 29.
Oh, you're talking about the engineering report that we
So
received?
this is a moot point now, right?
Correct.
But they did still do services for the idle house.
Are they in here?
Like, they called it idle, IDL,
Idle.
Oh, yeah,
28, I think it is.
yeah.
Page 28.
And then, so can you provide some color around page 28, and is there a narrative that goes along with this, or what's our takeaway from sheet 4 and 5?
Honestly, I have not worked with this lady at all. Stephen has. So this was the original plans when she came out and looked and gave her professional opinion on what needs to be done. I think Natalie would have to go out and look at it in case it was something that we ever wanted to remodel. But I don't have a lot of information on this, so, sorry.
Could we get something in the packet for next month with a narrative and then the pages that are appropriate?
Sure.
So where are we?
So we are at old business now.
Okay,
Page
World
108.
Learner Agreement,
Um,
was that accepted by the other party?
It was, except that then the attorney came back to me and said that, if you look on page 108, the attorney for World Learner said that there's a 2-year contract and it's due January 30th, 2019. So
Yep.
they thought we might as well just wait till January, till this expires,
Okay.
and then rewrite this, so we don't have to rewrite it again in January.
Okay,
So it's just on hold till January.
all right. So trail system maps, that's something Stephen was working on?
Yes, Steven's working on it. We talked to Nate actually yesterday. He was gonna contact you now that he's on summer break.
Okay,
And we just kind of talked about, and discussed how many trail markers we've put. I think we were at 5 or 6, the different areas we'd want to put them, what we'd want to put on them. So he was going to work on that, get a hold of
Okay.
Stephen.
Sounds good. Bad debt, is that something we're gonna be talking about in closed
Bad
session?
debt, we're just kind of tabling till we have a finance meeting.
Okay,
So I would just say that I would be in favor of writing off everything that was from a foreclosure or a bankruptcy, and I'd like to make a motion to do that so that we can just, because that's not, in question. It's really just those 5 or 6 other accounts. So I would make a motion that we write off the bad debt that is a result of foreclosure or bankruptcy.
good, good motion, do I hear a second?
Second?
Motion and a second, any further discussion?
I have a couple questions. So how much is this, and then what work has been done to validate that it's really a bad debt? And are we talking BK7, BK13? What's the dollar amount? How many accounts?
So it was in our packet before you were on the board.
Yep.
So it is something that,
Stephen has been following up on. I think it was presented last year, actually, and the board kind of tabled it and wanted to look more into it. He did, and he presented the same. I did find 3 accounts that were ended up getting paid because the units were sold. There is, like Judith said, there's probably about 15 accounts maybe total. There's about 5 of them that are just the people left and we don't know what happened to them. We might want to do some title research, and the rest are all bankruptcies or foreclosures. And their previous owners, some of them up to 3 to 4 years ago.
Again, I guess I wasn't privy to this information that the rest of you may be privy to, but I think that it's imperative that we do our due diligence to make sure that all of those are in fact uncollectible.
so I personally feel satisfied with the bankruptcies and the foreclosures. The other 5 I'm interested in looking into.
Yep.
So that's,
And do we know how much this is?
it was all totaled up.
Right.
It would be in
I think it
the,
was 18,000, and we took off another, like we were down to 14 something. So minus those 5, I don't remember what the amounts
so
are.
in terms of the ones that closed that were not bankruptcies or foreclosures, there was, the low one was $185, the high one was $1,200. So that's the range that we're looking at. I think there were 5 accounts.
Okay, so we have a motion, we got a second. Right now, we're having further discussion. The one thing that, so I don't typically vote unless it's in the event of like a tie. What I would recommend people do it for the most part is, when we're making decisions like this, the more information that we have sitting in front of us, the better. That doesn't always happen. It might not always be needed, but again, people come tonight to vote on board matters. We get that opportunity to do so. Motions pass or they are rejected. So we have 2 ways to go here.
Okay, well, the motion is bad debt write-off of foreclosures and the bankruptcies.
Okay?
So I guess I have one question, maybe Stefan knows. How do we validate bankruptcies? Like, what are you suggesting that we do to these, our due diligence?
I can give a specific example in the past. In the past, there's been incidences where we've been served notice that of a pending bankruptcy. It wasn't a discharged bankruptcy, and it was presented to the board to write it off. Until we receive a discharged bankruptcy, and it's a bankruptcy 7, I would not recommend writing it off. If it's a bankruptcy 13, there's typically a payment plan or a schedule that's done by the court. So it really depends on what type of bankruptcy is and what's the disposition of the bankruptcy. But the process that they go through, we would have to ask Stephen or Carrie, but it would be my assumption that they go through the collection attorney,
Yep,
or
he
if they
did.
receive notice of it, they would also receive some sort of documentation from the individual that it's no longer a valid debt, and they should be able to provide that to us to substantiate that it's in fact not collectible.
So last year when these were presented, they came from Tim Fuller. He was the one who suggested writing these off.
So
And then,
Fuller sends the letter to the manager, and those would be, something that we could get copies of from Fuller or whoever was managing at the time.
And trust me, I'm not trying to say that there's no validity in writing these off, because I'm sure there is, but without having the ability to review it or be presented, I just don't think it wouldn't be
So I
me
would
doing
just,
what I need to do as far as
okay, so I,
ensuring
so I would, but I would say that there are certain things that we give responsibility to the management company for, and this is what they do. So they have an accounting section, they've got a collections attorney, and somehow between the collections attorney and and management, they have declared that these are bankruptcies and foreclosures. So, you know, I think it's not our responsibility to be, I think this falls under the category of letting management do their job.
Sure, and I would, my counter to that would be is what was been presented to us today.
Here's
Is
the
there,
list.
is there,
Right, and honestly, the reason I didn't have anything is because I thought this was gonna be talked about at the finance committee.
Right, and the only
So,
reason I
mean,
brought it up is because it's been kicked down the road for a while. And I just think that the only thing that it makes sense to vote off, you know, to vote to get rid of
I think you did.
the foreclosures and the bankruptcies and just
He has
focus
seen
in
it
on the
before.
other
Oh,
ones.
yeah?
But not tonight.
Oh, Stephanie.
We've seen that list before.
I don't think there's any harm in waiting if the finance committee is meeting on the other bad debt, that they can all be sorted out at that meeting.
So there won't be any more sorting out of foreclosures and bankruptcies. You know, that's all I'm talking about tonight, is writing off the foreclosures and the bankruptcies, which our collections attorney and our management company have come to the conclusion that
And
that-
I agree with Judith, you know, we paid the management, and they've went through all this, and I agree, let them do their job.
Do we know how much of the debt, of the 18,000? Like, is it a substantial amount? I'm
More
just curious.
Looks like a majority is foreclosure.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 accounts that were just sold foreclosures. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 foreclosures, and bankruptcies, 1. So,
and so all these foreclosures are past the redemption period?
Mhm. I believe so. Because most of them are like 2 to 3 years.
right.
I think we should vote.
Yeah, that's a good call. I mean, that's why we're a board.
I call
You have
call
one
the
opinion, I
I
have
call
another
the
opinion.
question.
All right, you've called the question. Call a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay?
Abstain. 2 for, 1 against.
Wait, no, we have, can you show of hands? So put the.
In favor?
In the favor, we have 2. Nay? We have 2. We have 1 abstention,
Mm,
so a tie.
yeah. So you vote aye.
Keep voting. It seems to me, I don't like to govern, you know, with, you know, controversy in mind. I'd like the board to be a little bit more collective in our efforts in terms of making decisions. It's clear to me that we're trying to make a decision, and some people would like to see more information. So with that said, I'm going to have to, you know, not be in favor of the motion. So my vote is nay. Motion fails.
I respect that.
Can we make it a board directive, though, that this information be provided in the next packet, so we can have time for those of us that voted nay to thoroughly consider it and then make it at the next meeting? Okay.
Now,
Okay. Let's see here, just want to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Oak Valley mailboxes, we are getting bids to put, you guys last month had approved putting shelter over the melt stations at Oak Valley. We've collected one bid and it was extremely high, so we're looking into some more bids. So hopefully next month we'll have something. I did talk to the manager over at Oak Valley, and they have decided to wait on putting in a new sign on their cost. So we are going to continue getting prices for the shelter and going to add some perennials or something. We were waiting to hear from them if they were putting a new sign. We didn't want the new plantings to get stomped on. So now that they've decided they're not gonna, we'll put some plantings in there, wait for bids.
Okay.
Okay?
Was the Oak Valley mailbox the same company as Juliet Park?
Mailbox. You mean the company that would build it?
Yeah.
That's the one who bid it? Yeah,
Oh,
it was
okay.
really high.
Oh,
Yeah, almost as high as the whole house itself. Yeah, the house that we're putting in Juliet was like 12 something, I believe. This was like 9 something. So it just seemed really high for what they were doing, so.
okay.
We have other bids coming out, but we're gonna get even more because it just seems a little pricey. So we'll continue with that. Any other questions? All right, letter F, Bobcat discussion. So, on page 110, I gave those over here. As we all know, the Kubota we got last August hasn't been the best product for the maintenance crew. And that's why Vern is here tonight to kind of explain their point of view as to why it's just not working for them.
Okay. So before you get started, Vern, I've always thought that, you guys have taken it upon yourselves to put together a case, right? You're coming to us, you're telling us that we don't have the right tool,
Yep.
the right equipment that we need to do the job. That's what you're coming to us for.
Correct.
So just so everyone knows, that's try to limit our discussion to what we have in front of us is we have a request to get them a tool that they can use, and the current solution they have is not the solution that we thought it was gonna be.
Correct.
So, I mean, the presentation you guys have outlined, it's pretty obvious. You've done a good comparison side by side. I mean, feel free to talk through it, but just know that the case you make in your comparison kind of speaks for itself.
Sure.
And you don't have to spend a lot of time on making a case further, but again, the floor is yours on giving us a little bit more information as far as the nature of this request.
Okay.
Okay, well, I guess you guys they all have a sheet of this,
Yes.
right? So,
Page 111.
everybody's had a chance to look at that and hear everything, so, yeah, my main thing is, it's a bull in a china shop. It's, it's bigger than the past, it does not turn sharp, it's almost tipped well over a dozen times with me and several times with my kid. I try and drive it more, but I don't even care to use it on safety reasons. We do it when we have to, but as far as its lifting capacity and everything, it's all the way around there. The only thing that this thing would be better for would be tilling the gardens, and we didn't do that last fall because we could not find a tiller, and we do this spring because we don't have gardens, Yeah, it's kind of frustrating, but I came up with such a good matrix as far as doing my job. I load up as much brush as I can, and then I take the biggest logs and fill the trailer to hold all that brush down. Therefore, I can make a lot less trips. And all the way around, I'm not very good at this.
And Vern, how long have you been in maintenance? How long have you been around
I've
heavy
been in maintenance all
equipment?
my life. In the 90s, I've drove multi-million-dollar aircraft, taxied them from the hangar to the gate, DC-10s, 727s. It's not that I need training on some. If it's got tracks, wheels, or a prop,
So
I can move
I'm
it.
prompting questions for you to give us a little bit more insight as to your experience.
Uh-huh.
And that's not because I don't think you have the experience.
Oh,
I'm
no.
trying to give us the ability to just
Yeah,
hear from you. And
there's not a whole lot of vehicles. I've dealt with quite a bit of heavy equipment, and if we had one, or maybe we do, I do not know that, one or two people on the board that operated heavy equipment, we wouldn't have got this in the first place. Just, it's,
Talk about the controls.
the controls for this thing, the Bobcat was right here, lifting the bucket, tipping it, dumping it, the claws, and my other hand on the steering wheel. This thing here, I have to take my hands off the steering wheel, and sometimes I need that when I'm digging down or whatever the job is that I'm doing. The controls are back here, so I'm not even touching the steering wheel. And that would work for a farmer, because that's what tractors are for. They're looking back there and whatever they're pulling. That thing's made to pull. It'll pull whatever you need, but it's not made to lift. The motor's up front. I've had that thing on one wheel before, and if I didn't slam that bucket down fast, I think I gave you a video of it, or I gave it to Carrie. It gets spooky, you know. It's not if it tips over, it's when. 'Cause
So you've used the tractor now for, we got it last August, is that correct?
Yeah.
So we've had about, let's say, pretty close to, over a half a year. And it seems like what you've learned in that time is, nope, this wasn't the piece of equipment that we needed to get the job done.
Most of this stuff I pointed out, didn't know about the danger factor, but I pointed most of this stuff out before we even got it. And it's, yeah, it's a little spooky.
Okay.
It's, yeah, well, and if you look at pictures, I don't know if they have these pictures, it's, everything's all in front. It's,
And just the trails too, it just does not go down the trails.
yeah,
That's-
some places, I'm trying to work a big log out of some areas, I need the smallest little heavy piece of equipment I can get, and that thing was perfect. I think, I don't know if it's something we feel we can't afford, but I believe that Jonathan's never been doing better than it is now. And I believe it's because I don't have to farm out a lot of work. I do anything that I can. I do it myself or with me and my helpers. I do, if it looks like something that might be a little hairy, I'll have John Steele or Jim Steele drop a tree. If it's anywhere where it might give me a little trouble, I know what I'm doing on that stuff as well. But if it's anything that could be any close to dangerous, I'll let him drop it. And I think you even worked with me one day on hauling something out of there
Yeah.
last summer, I believe.
Yeah.
But that was a big tree. That was
So,
huge.
I don't dispute with you that the Toolcat is a great piece of equipment.
Okay.
Not at all. I think it is a great piece of equipment.
Mhm.
I think what we were looking to make the determination on last year is, it's hard to be an association. We have reserve funds to purchase capital equipment or to invest in common elements in our association. But the hard part is we're charged with governance, and we're charged with the fiduciary responsibility to look at ways to get the job done effectively for the most appropriate price. And I think the decision on looking at a tractor was made not only thinking that we could get the job done, because it had the similar features that a Toolcat did, but we realized that Jonathan Association, sometimes we can't just go out and spend money haphazardly. And I'm not saying it would have been haphazardly, but I'm saying that we thought that the tractor could get the job done. What we're hearing tonight is that it's not the tool for the job.
Right.
Can I ask two questions? What was the price of the tractor when we purchased it last year?
30,000.
It was $30,000, then
Yeah, and
minus
then
the
the
trade-in?
trade-in was like close to 15. if you use the number.
30 with tax, I would imagine.
Tax on the 15, yeah. And the Bobcat that we got rid of, what year was it and how many hours were on it?
It was 2005 or 6.
I believe it was a 2005, and it had 2,600 hours on it. I've only put 70 hours on this thing, and when we have a stormy month, I can put that on in 2 weeks, 70 hours. We're coming up on a year.
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay.
I had a resident come to me, and they watched Vern do this one particular thing, and this man said to me, "Why does he have equipment like that for? It's wider than the trails. It was tearing them up." They said he had to go up and back up, turn around, And they just couldn't understand why we would allow something like that. So that's just what was told to me.
I actually had a resident come in too, a day he wasn't in the office, and she said the same thing. She said, I saw Bernard on the trails and an orange tractor, and it just about tipped over. She said, why is he driving a tractor? And I said, well, we're working on it. So, so there has been some residents that have, made some points about it, but
Do we know how wide the trails are?
they're 6 feet.
6 feet, okay.
Some less, some more.
Yeah,
That's quite-
they're roughly 6. And it's not so much the width of the trail, it's the turning around. So I don't know, on this comparison, the turning radius on the Bobcat is like 8.9 feet or something.
Yeah, and to turn, some of our trails are pretty tight turns, you come up to a T, basically. That tractor, curb to curb, turning a U-turn is 23 feet.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the trade-in and the cost of $22,011.88.
I second that.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Judy, do you have a question?
Yes, Bobcat and Toolcat. Is that the
Yeah, same. Bobcat is the brand.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. 22.
Is it like a Lexus where they give you a bow on it when you pick it up?
If it was new, probably. This one's not new.
A hat.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, Stephen wanted to point out, I don't know if it matters, but using reserve money, because we aren't using the full 57,000 for the parks, we're saving with the budget that you approved tonight, 15.5.
I think you're sold, it's time to close.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, so motion and a second. Any further discussion? All vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Well, so when will we expect to kind of receive it?
We'll call them tomorrow, hopefully it's still there, but we'll contact them tomorrow.
Okay.
Probably right at 8:01.
Well, they open the shop at 7:30.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
All right.
Idle House under old business. Judith.
So, hopefully everybody received the nomination report that I emailed out. And, I sent out, I think, 2 updates, but I just want to basically let everybody know where we're at. I did meet with Liz Hanson from the city, and she is the person that interacts with the Historic Preservation Committee, which is the Chaska Local Historic Committee. And she is going to actually be at our meeting next month at the open forum to answer any questions that you might have regarding the Idle House and its historic designation. And so the document that I sent out is the document that the Historic Preservation Committee used as the nomination in 2006 when it received local designation as a historic property. In order for the Jonathan Association to be able to apply for any grant money, to have anything done on the Idle House, it has to have, it has to be on the National Register. So the next step, and it was never, that step was never taken because that's a step that has to be taken by the Jonathan Association. It's not something that the HPC, the Historic Preservation Committee, would do. And so the way that this the logistics of this whole thing would be that the Jonathan Association would submit paperwork to a nomination to be placed, to have the Idle House placed on the Historic Register. Once that paperwork was in progress, then we would be eligible to apply for a grant for, generally, you apply for a $10,000 grant and you have an architect that works exclusively with historic properties go out and take a look at the property and decide whether or not it is sound enough to be renovated, and come up with essentially a scope of work for renovation. And so that can be covered by a $10,000 grant, and that grant money is available, but you have to be in the process of trying to get on the historic register. Once you have that scope of work from the architect that works with historic properties, then you sort of have a template of what needs to be done, and you know that you can, if you need a new roof, if you need tuck pointing, if you need interior work, and then you can go and apply for grants from the state of Minnesota to have that work done. But you have to have that scope of work from the architect that works with historic properties, and there are a number of them. So that is kind of the process. So really the next step would be for us to seek nomination to the Historic Register, and I'm just in the process. I've been put in touch with a number of people that can help us do that, and my goal is by the next meeting that I'd have more details on that. There might be some small costs, some filing fees with the state and so forth. But once we do get that paperwork started, then we can seek the grant money, the $10,000 grant, to have an architect do the evaluation. So that's kind of the process, and next month before the meeting, you can ask some questions of Ms. Hanson, who represents the HPC, the local historic preservation committee.
I was approached, somebody is interested in buying the Idle House, and he said he emailed you, Carrie, and his boss, and I sent it to Judith, and I explained to this man that it has to be eminent domain with the city, and if we have a buyer, they would follow through with it. That's what I was told at one time. But he had a lot of questions, and that's why he wanted to talk to the Jonathan people to find out how much property, this. And then that's the last I've heard.
Yeah, I talked to him, I never received his email, and I asked him about it, and he said he did send me one, but I never got it, so we never connected on his questions. So I can reach out to him again and ask him.
Yes, because he's definitely, his boss,
Right.
I think his boss lives in Eden Prairie, but he's
Might be
definitely
better off
interested.
contacting Judith, she knows more about it than I do probably. Either one.
Okay.
So are there any potential downfalls of being on the historic register?
I mean, I don't believe so. One thing that Liz did say to me is that it would be easier for the Jonathan Association to renovate the Idle House than it would be to get it off the HPC historic designation. And in other words, the city has absolutely no plans of ever removing it from removing the historic designation, and yet we can't move forward and apply for any grants unless we are applying to be on the National Registry. So to me, it seems to make sense to go forward with getting on the National Registry and seeing what grant money is available. And it is, because it's been designated as historic property, regardless of who, so if we ended up doing eminent domain and working with somebody, then they would still be required to follow through. Because it's been deemed a historic property, they would still be required to follow through with all of the historic renovations. So, and in order for them to do that, it would have to be on the National Registry. So to have it be on the local, to have local designation and not be on the National Registry, you're sort of between a rock and a hard place. You can't apply for any grants until you're on the National Registry. So, I mean, I've learned a lot in a month, and I thought this was very interesting reading. I just would encourage, if any of you have not had a chance to read it, I could understand why it was given historic designation. And I thought it was really kind of a funny coincidence that Lano equipment that the Lano family used to live in the Idle House. Anyway, for what it's worth, I think that's pretty funny.
We can get a
but-
discount.
Yeah, exactly.
Or donation,
Right, yeah,
in kind, yeah.
yeah.
So what's the board's end game with the Idle House? It hasn't been used for, what, a decade or more? So, I know it's a common element, but no one's used it for any purpose other than potentially walking through the yard. So what's our end game? Where are we going with this?
So I think that we have no choice but to renovate the Idle House. It belongs to us. It's property that we own. It's been sitting vacant for 13 years. It's been, I think we need to take responsibility for what we own. I think that it makes sense to apply for grant money from the state and see if we can get some help in this endeavor. The trail.
But would you use it for like entertainment, or what would you use the building for?
So it would be a common element, just.
We could rent
Just
it.
like the pavilion is. So you would be able to, so residents would be able to rent it out for, like book club or graduation parties, or, I mean, there is a big yard there, so it would have a lot of outdoor space. And, a lot of this is kind of out of our hands. It was on the property when it's been a common element since the beginning of Jonathan. And, if you read the nomination, you'll see that at one point in time it was a cooperative. And then after that it was the Jonathan Children's House. It was a daycare center essentially. Right now, it's having a negative impact on our ability to get property insurance. I think more importantly, it is a hazard to our community because people can break in there. We've had break-ins in the past. There can be a lot of unpleasant things going on in a vacant home. And so over the past 13 years, haven't really had the time or the money to deal with this huge issue because we've been dealing with lawsuits. We've been on a 5-year trail project. We've done the pavilion, we've done the silo, and I just think the time has come that we take responsibility for the fact that we own this, what has been designated as the historic property, and start taking the steps to renovate the property and use it as a common element. I see it as similar to a party room in a condo building. It's a common space that people can use for book clubs, for monthly meetings, for baby showers, that sort of thing.
We rent it out as a rental property?
So I'd have to look, I think that we could. I'd have to look at our documents to be clear on that. It's zoned residential, so,
Just an idea.
Right. Yeah.
That's one of my concerns is that, if we're gonna put money into it, we need to put money into it so it's its highest and best use. And if it's just to sit there vacant but with pretty paint inside versus you know, as it sits now, it's secure, and if it doesn't have an alarm system, why don't we have one?
So I think the first thing we could do is have our board meeting there. That's why I think there's no reason to renovate the Karen house, because when the Idle house is completed, we could have our board meetings there. I see it as a gathering spot for, I know people who live in Jonathan that live in very small townhomes, and they don't have any, they would love to be able to rent that space to use for like birthday parties for their kids, or, you know, a graduation party. So I just would encourage us to move forward and seek a nomination to the Historic Register. And when I come back next month, I'll have a little bit more information about what that looks like. And the gentleman that is interested in buying it, I just want to encourage him to, you know, meet with me, and he can be involved in some of these
Decisions.
yeah, well, and some of the, he can gain some information, and then it would still be up to the board as to whether or not they wanted to move forward with renovating the property and using it as a common element, or if they wanted to go the eminent domain route, you know. But I mean, I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand that.
So Carrie, would you do that when you email this person? Would you put him in touch with Judith?
Absolutely.
Because I forwarded everything to her, but I didn't to him.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your work on this, Judith.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
So we'll look forward to next month for those here.
So, you know, for those of you that haven't read this over, read over the historic the nomination, and then just be ready with any questions that you might have for Liz Hanson during open forum next month.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so that concludes any old business. Moving on to new business, trail improvements, starting on page 112. Carrie, I'll let you kind of discuss, and then I also did a little bit of some research on my own here to kind of
Sure.
supplement.
So we went through the trails a couple weeks ago, just kind of pulling through what we have left for the last 2 years here. And past 2 years, we've spent around roughly $150,000. So we tried to pull trails that were in the same areas so that we aren't scattering throughout Jonathan, which also helped keep the cost down a lot. Justin will probably relate to this, but Clee Hall did say that the prices have gone up a lot on asphalt, but because we're keeping them in the same areas and not scattering so much, they can keep the price down. On page, sorry here, 120, our management suggestions for the trails to do this year. And just so nobody gets confused, on neighborhood 11 where it says seal coat, that doesn't mean to seal coat, it means to overlay, but in 2015, those trails are seal coated. But they're still in pretty rough shape. And we figured as long as we're in neighborhood 11, we just kind of tackle it all at once. We didn't get 3 bids just because we didn't have the time with the late snowstorm. But at the cost savings that we had last year, we thought Clee Hall did a really good job. Their trails kept up over the winter, and we'd stick with them unless the board wants us to go out. But
Yeah, so just to supplement those thoughts, I took the liberty of looking at their invoice or their proposal from last year. On an average square foot basis, looking at their proposal last year, we're running right at around $1.98 per square foot. That was about a savings, if memory serves me right, to be right around between 50 and 75% cheaper than what we were seeing with other vendors at the time. This year, this proposal is turning out to be right around $1.97 average on a square foot basis. And I'm kind of a producer price index person. I like to look at some of these numbers, and everyone knows that the price of petroleum is rapidly increasing. On a change from same month last year basis in terms of the producer price index, right now asphalt's running about 4% more than it was same month last year. We're not in the busy season yet, but that was really the only data I had to look at. But in any case, it does show that the price of asphalt is going up you're gonna see anywhere, in my professional opinion, between 20 and 40% increase in petroleum commodity prices. So I think that going forward with the proposal and with the pricing that we have here, I think this is a good idea for us to do. I think it's good for the association and good for our residents.
Where did you find the total amount of square, oh, there's 75,000 square feet.
So when you look at last year, the last year's proposal, the basketball court square footage wasn't on their original proposal, but when you look at we did about right around 62 or between 62 and 65,000 square feet of trails, and then the rest of that was basketball courts. So it really ends up being about the same total. Just this year, we're doing a little bit more trails specific. And like Carrie mentioned, we're looking to kind of hone in some of these areas, which gave us a little bit of a price benefit, if you will.
And then, so the list on page 2 of Clee Hall's estimate, this is, all these trails have been walked by management. None of these were on the decommission list, or
Right, correct.
none of these are non-Jonathan properties.
That is correct.
So I'd make a motion that we approve the Clee Hall blacktopping invoice in the amount of $148,770, with the expectation that since this is a 2-inch lift, that all areas that now have a 2-inch higher be backfilled by management company with black dirt to even out the grade within 21 business days from completion.
Do we have a motion? Do I have a second?
I second.
And the reason why I suggest that we put a time frame to the backfill of the lift is that there's still areas within Jonathan that haven't been brought up from past, and they're a tripping hazard, and they're dangerous in some spots.
So I've taken the liberty to have some discussion here with management, and what I'm hearing is that the black dirt route, although possible, and, you know, in trying to keep it so that it's, you know, in essence of looking good, right? You're planting black dirt, you're getting grass down, trying to get it to grow, all the things that go along with getting the grass to grow, like watering, fertilizing if need be, that's one thing. What I'm hearing from them is that it looks like it might be more effective for us to put mulch there. So if that's a possibility, that's something the board can consider. But in any case, from what I've heard, we have done mulch around some areas in the past, and it seems like that's done what we needed to do without having the ongoing struggle of getting grass to grow.
The grass doesn't grow and the dirt washes away when a heavy rain, because it does. I mean, the mulch does a little bit too, but it absorbs the water and it doesn't wash away as quickly. And the seed just gets washed away, and we don't have watering options for that, so.
And that's consistent with what the city does when they're gonna drive vehicles, you know, along the path that was gonna get damaged.
What-
So, the mulch, I've seen them do that.
The
Wood
city
chips.
does that?
Yeah, well, I've seen the city do
Chips.
that, wood chips. My concern is that we can't keep lifting the trail, but not worrying about when you slide off
So
the trail.
something needs to be done.
And it needs to be done within a few weeks after the trail being completed.
Okay.
So with that being said, within a few weeks, do we know when they can start this work? And is Vern available then to put in that mulch within that time frame?
He didn't give me an exact, he said the sooner we get back to him, the sooner he can get us on a schedule within 2 or 3 weeks, June-ish somewhere, he said. And we just will make it happen to get it, you know, we'll just rearrange the schedule.
Okay.
As long as there's no big storms, we can just rearrange things. If that's what you want.
And I remember a few years ago, we were at $375 a square foot.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought it was 350, but
Yeah, maybe it was 350, yeah, maybe that's what it was. But it was 3.5, 375.
yeah, we're getting competitive rates here. All right, so we have motion and a second. Again, we had some further discussion around, do we use black dirt seed or do we place mulch in those areas? Is the board gonna make any movement on that front? Do we need to amend anything?
I'd like to amend the motion that we use mulch rather than dirt. And I'd also like to bump out I think 21 days is kind of a tight window, so I'd like to amend it to 30 days.
I'd second that.
Okay, we've amended motion in a second. Any further discussion? Call vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, irrigation startup in Clover Ridge or Clover Preserve, one of them.
Yep,
Cloverfield.
okay, so Paul Benz called me. He's been, since 2012, he has been irrigating these areas, meaning he's starting up the system. Running, there's 2 areas. I have a map. So Kerber Park, right off of Kerber Pass, there's a park and a mail station that is irrigated. And then up towards Sophia Drive, there's another green area. Across the street from a mail station is just a green area that is always been watered.
Are we watering it every month? Okay.
Yep. So he actually called me again today. They want to start it tomorrow if we want to keep going with it. So he needs to contact the city to say, yes, we're going to start the system, or no, we're not. And I put the pricing here, roughly what it costs us per summer to run those 2 irrigation systems.
Where else do we have irrigation in Jonathan, do you know?
There's some over on Clover Ridge Drive, but we haven't ran that in like 10 years, I think he said.
So this might be the only place that we pay for irrigation, and that's because the developer put it in,
Correct,
and we're maintaining it because it's on Jonathan property.
correct. The only other place is Clover Ridge School, but we don't do that, the school does.
Yeah. I don't think we have any resolution for irrigation in Clover.
Why do you need a city permit?
Probably because they have to open it. I don't know. He just said that they needed a city permit to start it up.
The city actually has
The box.
the meter.
Yeah.
And the
Oh,
city hooks it up, and then he takes over and gets it.
So the question is, do we want to continue paying for irrigation in these areas, or do we want to
Yep.
stop irrigating it?
Correct.
I recommend that we take a break from irrigating and see if anybody notices. I mean,
I think the
Yeah.
one area we probably won't, but the Kerber we might, but I think that's a good idea.
and what does everybody else think? I mean, I'm just throwing it out.
Well, we've had a lot of success in the past with water, stormwater pond, collection ponds. And
Aerators.
aerators and, I don't know. I guess my question is why would we be removing the amenity?
So we wouldn't remove it, we just wouldn't turn it on. What happened in this case was the developer put it in, and, you know, I think it should be up to us whether we want to run it or not. I don't think that we irrigate any of the other, 20 tot lots that we have in Jonathan.
And I don't know that looks much better, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I mean, we're fortunate around the association that most areas remain pretty green, unless we're in a drought. So,
How big an area is it?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How big is the area?
The tot lot at Kerber is probably, the size of this area, and the other one is longer but skinnier. So probably about square footage the same, but
Yeah.
I know that,
Yeah.
this is just my personal opinion, but water is a precious resource, and just spending money on watering land, I don't think it's a very sustainable way to operate. I think that, we should conserve our resource, and water is, we're in the land of 10,000 lakes. I know Minnesota has great water resources, but I think we need to also be mindful of the environment as well.
So I make a motion that we do not irrigate this area this year.
in the spirit of conservation, as a biologist,
That's what I would say.
I'll second that motion.
Motion, any second, any further discussion? Call vote, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, we're almost done here.
yep.
Tree policy, Mr. Wolf.
Oh, thank you. On page 21, there is the existing tree policy. And I guess the reason why I wanted to bring this to the board's attention is that there's actually a board resolution that references the association's written tree policy.
I don't have a page 21.
We don't?
Well, I do, but
Oh, here we go.
it
Sorry.
says this.
As you can see,
Policy.
it can be easily missed. It's
small.
4 sentences.
Who wrote this policy?
Natalie.
Who wrote the policy?
Natalie did.
Okay. Well, I guess, what I'd like to do is I'd like to ask Vern and Carrie to perhaps use their years and years of experience about what our tree policy should really look like in writing, based on, knowing our property in and out. And with the spirit of, when we take a tree, we replace a tree. That we have a diverse species of trees planted throughout the association. And perhaps present us with something that may be a little more of that spirit.
I think we need a tree committee. I think this is something that we shouldn't be asking management to do. I think the board should come up with a tree policy and present it to the rest of the board. And because I think we know what we want, right? I don't know that,
Well, I'm looking at the existing one, so visually assess the trees in the spring. Okay, makes sense. I was thinking, what things would be looked for? Would it be looked for, dead branches, disease, things like that? Determine removal and replacement, okay. Maintenance and trimming of trees throughout the year when needed. And then 4, if board disagrees with management's professional opinion, contact an arborist. So, what do you envision the tree policy looking like? I envision that it, when you take one, you replace one. There's some sort of framework around when assessments take place. There's some sort of minimum standard. If we're gonna plant trees, we plant trees at, between 1 inch and 3 inch in diameter based on the location.
so I
Something
agree.
like that.
I think it's a good idea to have a tree policy. I think it should originate with the board and not with management, because I think we need to decide what we want to address regarding trees.
Sure.
And then I think that we should write the policy and then expect management to implement it. So I would volunteer to be part of a tree committee, but I think that you need to be on that too, because you obviously have some good ideas.
Well, that's very kind of you. Very kind of you
So maybe.
to acknowledge that.
Maybe we can, similar to the garden committee.
Let me give you a little reason why. I think, we continually reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Carrie and her management company has hundreds and hundreds of properties. We're not reinventing the wheel here, and we shouldn't. There's many things that if someone were paid and had the time to do, they could research different park boards policies, different city policies, take the best of the best, put it together and have a document. Quite frankly, I'm involved with numerous committees on the board, and it takes a lot of time. And this seems like something that a paid staff member could easily take care of in a couple days when it's raining or.
Well, I'm not sure
So-
that management knows what we're looking for. So, I don't know, could we get some input from you guys? What are your,
I think a committee is always good because I do like the board's direction on which way to go, because I feel like I don't want to put a bunch of time into it and then it's not what you guys are looking for. So maybe if you guys kind of wrote a policy to the fact of what you're looking for, if you gave us direction that way, like we want to know, what size trees are going to be removed, and if it is, for what reason, why are you going to replace it? Do the residents get input? That type of stuff. We could collect some different tree policies. The thing different from Jonathan and the other 100 and some that Gasson has, Jonathan's so big. Just Clover alone, we have over 2,000 trees. So,
Not all those are ours, though.
in Clover,
They're not all Jonathan trees in Clover.
I thought we did maintain all of them.
Yeah.
Not on someone's personal property.
Oh,
No, not on personal property, but the boulevard trees and stuff.
That number
So-
seems a little high, but sorry.
Right, but with all the trails and all the trees that we have, it just seems like a really big project, but, I'm not saying we won't do it, but having a committee, I think, could help at least get it started, and then, like you said, we carry it through.
Well, let's back this up a little bit. So we have board resolutions that refer to our tree policy. So does the board agree that we should have a written tree policy? Yeah. Everybody kind of agree with that? If it's one of our resolutions? So does the board agree that this is a sufficient policy or an insufficient policy? Based on the size of our organization and how many, and our assets and what we have. I personally, I have 3 trees. Unless you count rental property, then you can add 4 or 5. But, I mean, if you touch 2,000 trees, you're gonna know trees a lot better than me. So, but I'm not looking to put work on you, so if the board wants to form a committee, so be it. But I just think it would be, it's our duty to make sure we have enough. If we're gonna have a policy, let's make sure it's a
Sometimes on committees,
well policy.
sometimes on committees, depending on what gets done, a lot of it gets put back on your plate anyway.
Sure.
So it seems like any committee we have, it's really a work group between a select few board members and management.
Yep.
So if we looked at this from more of a, a high-end level, right, 40,000 foot level, the board could be involved with trying to relay and articulate a vision or an idea of what something should look like. And then to give you the ability to take it and kind of make it work within the parameters that you guys are working with on a day-to-day basis.
Right,
That's probably what it's gonna look like anyway.
right.
Not saying that, I still think a committee would be great, but again, you guys are an integral part of those committees regardless of architectural review committee or whatever, you guys are still involved to some extent.
Sure.
So, I think you could have a committee, it's just, I think you guys are gonna have to be a part of that effort.
Right. No, I agree. So it's,
Right? I mean, it might,
I just want to bring it to the floor of the board. If the board chooses not to go forward with it, so be it. If you want to pivot or makes. We can definitely table this until next month to discuss it further or form a committee, form a charter. But
What's gonna be probably an even more important topic as the Emerald Ash Borer moves closer. So he said, at some point in time, we're probably gonna have a tree committee, I mean, but it is certainly something that can wait till next month if we wanna just kind of mull it around a little.
I'm sensing some fatigue amongst the board. I think it might be best to table this,
Okay.
just my thought.
Yeah.
I move the table till next month.
all right.
Okay.
Great. Oh my goodness. With that being said, I'd make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, we have a motion, do we have a second? Any further discussion?
I second.
Call vote, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Note to self, put the tree policy a little higher on the list next month.
I had one last year.